Have you ever not slept for so long that you started hallucinating? What was your experience? Yeah. After 70 hours or so, it's pretty disorienting, and rational thinking starts to get very slow. The hallucinations are not realistic, but are more like gaps in your vision that are shaped like things. Might see a silhouette at a distance, or briefly around a corner. Very difficult to function in this state. Would not recommend. For me, the sleep afterwards isn't very quality either. I usually wake up feeling shitty still. It feels like I'm stressing in my sleep. I stayed up for 3 days straight when I was 17. On the third day, I kept hearing people call my name, as if they wanted to ask me a question. It didn't help that I also thought it would be a good idea to go to school that day, multiple times a day. I would bolt upright and look around to see who wanted my attention, only to see my fellow students huddled over their work. It got worse as the day went. My friends were a little worried about how weird I was acting. I walked home after school, listening to my headphones as usual, but I still kept hearing someone call my name. The music made it worse. Whatever I was hearing was already kind of muffled, and having a song playing in my ears only seemed to obscure it more. When I finally got home, I told my mom I wasn't feeling well, went to my room and went straight to sleep at 4 in the afternoon. As nodded off, I heard that voice calling for me again, making me jerk out of my sleep. This repeated a couple times until I convinced myself that I already told my mom I was sick, and if she really needed me, she could come get me. I finally went to sleep and didn't wake until 2 AM to use the bathroom, and then went to sleep afterwards again until 9 AM the next day. I was an idiot. This is very similar to my experience at about the same age. Same amount of time awake. I've always had sleep issues, but I'll never do that again. I went roughly 4 days on 5 hours sleep total. I could function fine, but I would just constantly hear things like people mumbling right next to me. Yeah. It's not like you see pink elephants on parade or anything. You think you hear people chatting behind you, or you see stuff moving just on the edge of your vision. Super creepy and unfun, but not particularly dramatic. Ex-addict was driving home after a 3-day meth bender. Needed food, so drove into a McDonald's drive-thru. When asked for my order, I replied McChicken meal, please. Then they asked me again, and I said McChicken meal, please. Then they asked me again, and I was like, can't you duck and hear me? McChicken meal. And that's when I realized I wasn't actually saying anything. I was just replying in my head. I used to abuse Adderall and would stay up 3 days straight working on bullshit projects that I never finished. Anyway, one time I was at the end of a 3-day bender where I had taken about 10 days worth of Adderall. As I laid down to sleep, I started hearing my mom arguing with my brother and his girlfriend. It went on for a long time, and I was like, surely they have to be at work and this shit will end soon. Eventually my brother's baby started to cry, and the adults were too busy arguing to calm her down. I said duck that, and stormed out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and the house was completely empty. Okay, story time. My mom suffers from narcolepsy, and one of the first treatments they gave her basically drove her also completely insane. She was up for 5 days. One day I walked into her bedroom hearing her talking to someone. I look around and ask her who she is talking to, and she tells me the lady in red. There is no one in the room at all, just us. I ask where is the lady, and she says the lady sits on the dresser and talks to her all night. I was like 14 at the time, so I went to the kitchen and hid her medicine until my stepdad got home and could take her to the hospital. The doctor was super upset about the meds her doctor had given her. It was way too much. Anyway, she stopped seeing the lady after they got all that straightened out. A buddy of mine landed a painting job working inside of a big commercial building, and he basically stayed in the place for 6 days straight smoking crystal meth and painting to meet his deadline and avoid hiring a crew to help him. On the 6th day the building caught fire and he ran into the lobby and was pulling people out into the streets and yelling to call 911. The fireman showed up and couldn't locate a fire because there was none. He was hallucinating. Overseas on a deployment, started getting sleep deprived for a period of time. Started hallucinating the big date / palm trees moving across the road like in the Lord of the Rings when the trees walk. This always makes me question some of the weird shit I saw. Was it real, or was I just really ducking tired from op-tempo? Memories tend to gather as a group too. Me and 2 other guys were on the post that saw the VBIED explosion, and all 3 of us had the exact same story to a T. Thing is, only 1 person was on post and we rotated throughout the day. We have no idea whose memory it actually was, but the shock of the situation just kind of merged our recollections over the next day and we couldn't figure out who was actually on post. Memories are ducking strange. I'm guessing it's because they're essentially compressed when they're stored. Symbols that aren't deemed essential are discarded, and you have a stripped down model of the memory used for processing and recall. Combined with the distortion of shock and trauma, there probably wasn't enough detail, or perhaps over-processing, to differentiate between primary and secondary sources. Yeah. Learning about memory and trauma in Psych 2 was like, oh, I wasn't looking for attention. I just have a brain and that's what brains do, lol. I hadn't slept for about 72 hours when I went to the doc gave me Ambien. I go home, get in bed and take one. A few minutes later, the floor was covered in water and the walls were melting. It was raining outside and the water on my windows was marching in formation. I've never known whether that was sleep deprivation or the effects of Ambien. I've never taken another. I was prescribed Ambien once. I took it and I could still wake up on it, but I started seeing the shadows in the corner of my room curling up and almost moving. It was freaky. I don't take Ambien anymore. I took Ambien one time and never again. Just one regular pill. I couldn't sleep in bed even after taking it, so I got up and decided to listen to music on my laptop. In the living room, we had a tall 6-foot metal light to light the room, and 2 songs in the metal pole became rubber and started bending and twisting all around. I thought it was cool until suddenly it started whipping at me. I swore it was trying to kill me. I ran into bed and hid under the covers as I swore I could hear metal scratching against the floor and door. Never again. I suffered from horrific insomnia about 12 years ago. I was on Lexapro, and one of the side effects is insomnia. At the time, that wasn't well documented. So I tried everything from Ambien to alcohol so I could sleep. I would usually get about a 3-hour nap at most before being awake again. I would go 3 to 5 days without sleeping. Eventually, I hit the point of desperation and start recreational substances to try and knock myself out. There were several occasions of hallucinations, but the one that sticks out is truly terrible. I was on day 6 without sleeping at least 5 hours. I was laying in bed and a friend came in to start talking with me. We had many great conversations since our friendship began, but hadn't talked in a while at that point. I told him how bad I was struggling and that honestly, killing myself would have been easier. He said he felt the same way many times, but that it was a terrible idea, and I knew how badly it had messed up his family. When I looked at him, he was a bloody mess on the side of his face, jaw ripped apart, teeth missing, but talking to me like nothing was wrong. He had been dead for a few years at that point. Suicide. Shot himself in his garage after years of substance abuse. And I just had a 3-hour conversation with a hallucination of a dead friend. I ended up switching meds to Celexa and my sleep issues disappeared within a month. So, if you are having sleeping issues, please go see a document. It's a dark place that damn near took me. I was on Lexapro, and one of the side effects is insomnia. Wait, really? Exclamation mark. No one told me that. I'm on Lexapro now and sometimes I have trouble getting to sleep at night. I really don't mind though, because I used to be on a really high dose of Zyprexa, and that knocked me out cold, and it was so bad that when I woke up in the morning I was still completely exhausted and had to drink an entire pot of coffee just to be able to wake up and start working. And to make matters worse, I was knocked out, so cold that I couldn't even dream at all. So I absolutely hated sleep, wouldn't you? If you passed out completely exhausted and woke up instantaneously, but it's actually 8 hours later and you're still completely exhausted. Exclamation mark. What a waste of time. And now my psychiatrist wants to increase my Lexapro, but at the same time she also wants to put me on a small dose of Zyprexa to help me sleep. I wonder what will happen. but for now I generally get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, though sometimes I might only get 4. But I still feel at least somewhat rested in the morning. And on rare occasions I'll just sleep all day. How long have you been on it? Mine got progressively worse the longer I was on it. It was a slow descent into madness and the doctors couldn't figure it out. Ambien didn't work on me. That's how bad it was. So make sure your doctor knows you are starting to have sleeping issues so you both can keep an eye on it. Fucking shadow people. It's bad for you. You shouldn't do it. But if you're asking this question, you're the type to try. Remember, it's not real and relax. Go to sleep. For a while, when I was active duty, I got really paranoid about the shadow people for obvious reasons. You have no idea the relief I felt when I found out I wasn't the only one who saw them. I really thought I was losing it, but man, I was just exhausted. An ex of mine called me and asked if he could come sleep with me as he hadn't been able to sleep for days and was seeing things, and he felt safe around me. As we were still friends, I said yes. When he came over, he said that he had been trying to hook up with girls, but couldn't do it as their faces were turning into demons, and he was afraid he would hurt them. Needless to say, I didn't sleep myself that night, and the next day we took him to the doctor for meds for his insomnia. There needs to be more people like you in the world. In the same way with my ex. We're still friends, and found out we were better off that way. We'll always be there for each other and love each other, but in a different way. Do you mind telling me a little about how you dealt with the breakup? I don't want to overstep, so no worries if you'd rather not. I absolutely understand. One of my closest friends is going through a breakup, and they both want to remain friends, and I just want to be able to give them the best advice I can. Spent a few weeks only getting about 4 hours of sleep a night. My brain started seeing, from the corners of my eyes, black things dropping from the ceiling that looked like giant spiders. I started making sure I got enough sleep. After a while I start to become seriously paranoid and I start hearing voices and things like that. It's not very fun. I have some serious issues with sleep, and sometimes it will get to the point where I will start seeing things out the corners of my eye that aren't actually happening, and I manage to scare the shit out of myself. Please get enough sleep. Don't fall into the habit of staying up for days on end. The longer you stay up, the harder it is to fall asleep. It seriously gets harder to fall asleep the longer you go, and you think you're tired, and you go to sleep, and you just can't. And the sleep isn't even that good when you do eventually fall asleep. I was like 2-day awake, and every time I laid on my bed I couldn't do anything besides stare at the ceiling with my head spinning, absolutely shit-faced and exhausted, and still couldn't actually get any sleep. And the sleep is indeed shitty. You wake up with a dry mouth, dizzy, terrible headache, still feeling tired, almost like a hangover. People who are reading this and have insomnia, get help ASAP. It doesn't get better over time. If you don't get help, take care of yourselves. During exam week I pulled 3 all-nighters in the library between tests. The library was open 24 hours, so I'd just stay up all night making note cards, then go take an exam during the day. I lived off campus and didn't want to spend the gas money. I'd go to the most isolated area, but the library would pretty much be cleared out by midnight. I started to see glimpses of people, and I thought it was a bunch of students ducking with me, but there was no one on that floor. I thought the lights went off at some point and maybe it was a sensor, so I started jumping around to reactivate it, but obviously, it was light the whole time. It's almost a regular occurrence for me by now, because I suffer from insomnia. There are 3 different types of hallucinations for me. 1. Funny, useless shit I know is fake. 2. Shit that could be real or not. 3. Extremely scary and traumatic shit I know is fake, but rattles me up every single time. Usually, they appear in that order. Pro tip: if you are experiencing visual hallucinations and you aren't sure whether something is real or not, take a photo with your smartphone and look at that. It is very unlikely that you hallucinate the same shit twice and in the exact same position. Works for me. At last. Edit. Holy son of a biscuit eater. This just about blew up in a matter of hours. I received a handful of genuinely interested people's questions and I'll try to answer all of them. Should I receive even more? To most of them, I already replied. We'll continue later. because, as I'm typing this, I'm awake at an hour I should not be awake. So I'll try and get some more shooty. Imagine the irony. After 30 hours I started seeing insects on the walls and on my desk that weren't there. Might have just been the light. Or paranoia because I'm massively afraid of spiders. Made it to 50 hours without really seeing anything else though. I see bugs a lot. Even after just staying up late. I feel like they are the introduction to the shadow people phase. No sleep for 4 days straight. It really ducks with your head. All sounds heightened to the maximum, and was sure I could hear all my neighbors talking shit about me. I had really bad sleep problems for years. At one point I went to a party having been awake for 36 hours when arriving. I didn't really hallucinate also, because I couldn't sleep. But when I finally did, I got the sleep I needed. The problem was mostly falling asleep. For me, stress and lack of sleep triggers some form of sleep paralysis and these weird dreams where I'm lying down somewhere and I can't see properly and I can't get up because everything is just so blurry and spinning around. It made me wake up in cold sweats, and I remember once waking up and falling back asleep so many times because I was too exhausted to keep my eyes open that I called my mom crying because I did not know whether I was awake or not. I'm better now. So in training to join the British Army Infantry, everyone does a defense exercise. Basically you deploy onto the area, then spend 72 straight hours digging trenches. No sleep, no rest. It's a double whammy between sleep deprivation and exhaustion. Although I never hallucinated, I did pass out onto some bloke though. I did see a few blokes experience crazy stuff. One bloke walked into a foggy field and was missing for hours. Once he realized he was lost, he lay on the floor, flipping between the channels on his radio saying hello and hoping someone would hear him. Another bloke who was a Welsh speaker lost the ability to distinguish between the two languages. He'd speak to you in Welsh, then get annoyed when you didn't understand him, believing he was speaking perfect English. Yeah, we pulled a solid week of defensive exercise with sleep departure. Shadow people are the worst. Always in and out of your peripherals. Bushes move, sneak up on you in the twilight. The worst was about day 4. Moving into position for a night raid. Somewhere along the way, while marching in full fighting order, I must have fallen asleep. In my mind. Found myself entering an old timey jazz club filled with shadow people. I stood around watching them all. Till suddenly a shadow person with glowing eyes jumped out and attacked. Woke up with the section 2 Ike grabbing my chest and pulling me out of a ditch. In retrospect, I probably got focused in the cat eyes on the helmet in front of me, got hypnotized by them, and wandered off into the ditch. What was maybe worse than the sleep deprivation itself was post-exerciser promise of extended leave. Only when, if, we could sleep for over 8 straight hours. We all thought that would be no problem. We longed for rest and would nod off for a few minutes every chance we got. When we were finally ordered into forced rest for leave, none of us could sleep for longer than 15 minutes at a time. It was pure torture. In the end, our extended leave was 2 days of teaching our bodies to sleep again with only a single day of leave for most of us at the end. Moral of the story: I would not recommend. My cousin was killed in a car crash after doing one of these exercises, and they let them go home afterwards. Driver fell asleep at the wheel and crashed head on with a pickup truck. Glad they made you sleep first. Once in my early 20s I took acid and didn't sleep at all for like 3 days. At one point on the 3rd day a door told me to go duck myself, and I really wasn't sure if it was from the drugs building up over time or because I was so tired. I guess there's some confusion over the wording, but this was not one dose. This was multiple red doses over the course of 3 days with diminishing returns. I was a passenger in a car, and looking out the window the shadows from trees would morph and grow and move. It was kinda scary, but I enjoyed it. It was like drugs before I did drugs. Don't do drugs. Do sleep. I thought a girl was tipping over in her chair, so I rushed over and pushed her to safety. Sorry, girl in public speaking class. Circa 1999. In college there we had a major group project. We all stayed on campus for 48 hours and no sleep. Let's just say that by the end we were all hallucinating while writing our code. At one point I remember thinking my code was talking, but the music had just started playing. If you enjoy watching these videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button and like this video. Thanks.